Imagine this. You're at a charming English village fair, admiring delicate lace displays under a grand pavilion, when a body slumps lifeless amid the fluttering fabrics, a puzzle only the sharped Miss Marple can unravel. Chapter 1. The Invitation. To St. Mary Mead's annual lace festival. Picture this. Folks, it's a crisp autumn morning in the sleepy village of St. Mary Mead, where the leaves are turning golden and the air carries that familiar hint of wood smoke from chimneys puffing away. Our story kicks off with Miss Jane Marple, that unassuming elderly spinster with a mind sharper than a knitting needle, sitting in her cozy cottage garden. She's tending to her roses, clipping away with those precise little snips, when the postman arrives with an envelope that looks far too elegant for everyday mail. "Good morning, Miss Marple," he says, tipping his hat. "Looks like something special today." And special it is, an invitation to the annual lace festival at the village hall. But not just any festival. This year's event is being held in a brand new Lace Pavilion, a fancy structure funded by the wealthy widow, Lady Harrington, who's turned her passion for antique lace into a full-blown spectacle. Miss Marple sets down her secateurs and opens the envelope with curiosity. The card inside is embossed with intricate lace patterns, inviting her as a guest of honor. You see, Miss Marple isn't just known for her detective skills around these parts. She's also got a reputation for her exquisite handmade doilies and lace collars, passed down from her Victorian-era grandmother. How thoughtful, she murmurs to herself, adjusting her spectacles. But as she reads on, she notices the festival. Promises displays from all over England, rare Brussels, point lace, delicate Chantilly veils, even some exotic pieces from Venice. It's not just a show. There's a competition too, with a hefty prize for the best original lace design. Miss Marple chuckles softly. I wonder if old Mrs. Bantry will enter her crochet work again. She does get so competitive. Now, let's dive a bit deeper into why this festival matters in St. Mary Mead. The village has always been a hub for traditional crafts, but Lady Harrington's involvement has elevated it. She's a formidable woman in her late 50s, widowed after her husband, Sir Reginald, passed away under mysterious circumstances a few years back, officially a hunting accident, but whispers in the tea rooms suggest otherwise. Lady Harrington poured her inheritance into restoring the old manor house and building this pavilion, a glass-domed wonder that lets sunlight filter through like a cathedral. It's meant to showcase lace as an art form, but Miss Marple senses there's more brewing. You know how she is always observing the little things, like how the invitation's ink smudges slightly, as if written in haste as the day of the festival approaches. Miss Marple prepares her entry, a delicate laced shawl she's been working on for months. Inspired by the patterns of spider webs in her garden, she packs it carefully in tissue paper and sets off on foot to the village hall, her sensible shoes crunching on the gravel path. Along the way, she bumps into her nephew, Raymond West, the famous author who's visiting from London. "Aunt Jane," he exclaims, kissing her cheek. "Off to that lace do. Sounds dreadfully quaint." Miss Marple smiles knowingly. "Quaint it may be, Raymond, but people are the same everywhere, full of secrets and surprises." Raymond laughs it off, but offers to escort her, chattering about his latest novel, a thriller set in a remote Scottish castle. Little does he know, the real thriller is about to unfold right here in St. Mary Mead. Arriving at the Lace Pavilion, Miss Marple is struck by its grandeur. The structure is like a giant greenhouse, with arched glass panels and wrought-iron frames draped in flowing white lace banners that billow gently in the breeze. Inside, Tables are laden with exhibits, fine needlepoint from local artisans, heirloom pieces from estates, and even a section for modern interpretations using silk threads and beads. The air smells of starch and lavender, with villagers milling about in their Sunday best. Lady Harrington greets guests at the entrance, her pearl necklace gleaming against a black velvet dress, morning attire, perhaps, or just her dramatic style. "Miss Marple, how delightful you've come," she says, her voice polished but with an edge of nervousness. "Your shawl will be the talk of the show." Miss Marple nods graciously and wanders through the displays, her keen eyes taking in every detail. She spots Colonel Bantry, Mrs. Bantry's husband, grumbling about the frilly nonsense while sneaking glances at a particularly risk-laced corset exhibit. Nearby, young Dolly Bantry, the Colonel's niece, is flirting with a handsome stranger named Victor Langford, a lace importer from London who's entered a rare Flemish bobbin lace piece. Victor's got that slick city charm, with a moustache waxed to perfection and a suit that's a tad too flashy for the countryside. It's authentic 18th century, he boasts to Dolly, who giggles and twirls her hair. Miss Marple overhears and thinks to herself, authentic. Those threads look suspiciously modern. As the morning progresses, the competition judging begins. The judges, a mix of local experts and a guest from the Victoria and Albert Museum, circulate with clipboards, murmuring approvals. Miss Marple places her shawl on the assigned table, next to entries from rivals like Miss Eliza Finch, the village spinster who's known for her intricate tatting, and Mr. Harold Sykes, a retired tailor with a knack for embroidered lace. There's tension in the air. Rumours fly that Lady Harrington has rigged the prize for her own entry, a massive lace tapestry depicting a medieval banquet. "It's worth a fortune," whispers Mrs. Price Ridley, the gossipy churchwarden, to Miss Marple. "But between you and me, it's not half as good as yours." Suddenly, the pavilion buzzes with excitement as the mayor announces the opening ceremony. Lady Harrington takes the stage, a small platform adorned with lace swags, and begins her speech. "Dear friends, lace is more than fabric. It's a thread connecting us to history, to elegance, to mystery." Her words hang in the air, and Miss Marple notices how Lady Harrington's hands tremble slightly, clutching the podium. Is it nerves or something else? The crowd applauds, but just as she's about to unveil the grand prize, a antique lace veil, said to have belonged to Queen Victoria's sharp cry echoes from the back of the pavilion. Everyone turns. There, slumped against a display case, is Victor Langford, his face pale, a trickle of blood staining his white shirt. Gasps ripple through the crowd. Dolly Bantry screams and faints into Colonel Bantry's arms. Lady Harrington freezes on stage, her eyes wide with shock, or is it recognition? Miss Marple, ever calm, pushes through the throng. "Call the police," she says firmly to a stunned bystander, "and don't touch anything." As chaos ensues, she kneels beside the body, noting the small dart-like wound on his neck, hidden partly by his collar. No weapon in sight, but nearby, a lace needle lies discarded on the floor, innocent or deadly. The police arrive swiftly, led by Inspector Slack, a gruff man who's crossed paths with Miss Marple before and dismisses her as a meddlesome old lady. "Poison dart, looks like," he mutters, sealing off the area. Probably a rival importer settling scores. But Miss Marple isn't convinced. She recalls Victor's boastful talk and the way Lady Harrington glanced at him during her speech. People don't die over lace, she thinks, unless the lace hides something deeper. As the pavilion clears out, villagers whispering furiously, Miss Marple gathers her shawl untouched amid the frenzied heads home, her mind already piecing together the puzzle. Back in her cottage, sipping tea by the fire, Miss Marple reflects on the day's events. Victor Langford wasn't just an importer. She'd overheard him arguing quietly with Harold Sykes earlier about forged certificates. Could it be a smuggling ring disguised as lace trading? Or perhaps a personal grudge? Darley Bantry seemed awfully smitten, and her uncle disapproved. Raymond drops by, excited by the drama. Aunt Jane, this is straight out of one of my books. Who do you think did it? Miss Marple smiles enigmatically. It's early days, dear. But mark my words, the threads will unravel. And that's where we leave Chapter 1, with the mystery just beginning to weave its web. Stick around for Chapter 2, where Miss Marple starts digging into the suspect's alibis and uncovers a hidden connection to Lady Harrington's past. Chapter 2, Unraveling Alibis and Whispers from the Past. All right. Let's pick up right where we left off in this cozy yet chilling tale. Miss Marple is back in her cottage, the fire crackling softly as she sips her evening tea, but her mind is far from relaxed. The image of Victor Langford's lifeless body amid the lace displays haunts her, and she knows this isn't a simple crime of passion or rivalry. No, there's a deeper thread here, one that ties back to secrets long buried in St. Mary. Mead, the next morning, bright and early. Miss Marple decides it's time to start poking around gently, of course, in her unassuming way. She slips on her tweed coat, grabs her walking stick, which doubles as a handy tool for pointing out inconsistencies, and heads out to visit the first suspect on her mental list. Lady Evelyn Harrington herself. Lady Harrington's manor house sits on the edge of the village, a sprawling Georgian building with ivy climbing the walls in manicured gardens that could rival those at Buckingham Palace. Miss Marple rings the bell, and after a moment, the door creaks open to reveal the butler, Jenkins, a stoic man in his 60s who's been with the family for decades. Miss Marple, he says, with a slight bow, his face impassive, but his eyes flickering with unease. Her ladyship is not receiving visitors today, what with the ... unfortunate events. Miss Marple smiles warmly. Oh, I quite understand, Jenkins. But perhaps you could tell her it's about the lace festival. I have a question about her lovely tapestry. It's a white lie, but one that gets her inside. Jenkins leads her to the drawing room, where Lady Harrington is seated by a bay window, staring out at the misty fields, a half-finished cup of coffee gone cold on the table beside her. Miss Marple, this is unexpected, Lady Harrington says, rising with forced composure. Her black dress from the day before has been replaced by a sombre grey one, and her hands fidget with a lace handkerchief antique Brussels point. Miss Marple notes, worth a small fortune. They exchange pleasantries about the weather and the shock of the murder, but Miss Marple steers the conversation skillfully. Tell me, Lady Harrington, where were you exactly when poor Mr. Langford met his end? I was near the front, admiring Miss Finch's tatting, but the pavilion was so crowded. Lady Harrington hesitates, her eyes darting to the side. I was on the stage, of course, preparing to unveil the prize veil. Everyone saw me there. Miss Marple nods thoughtfully. Yes, but just before your speech, I recall you stepping off for a moment to fetch something from the back room. Perhaps. It's a guess, based on a quick glance she'd caught earlier, but it hits home. Lady Harrington flushes. Well, yes, briefly. To adjust the lighting, but I was only gone a minute or two. Surely you don't think... Miss Marple reassures her with a gentle pat on the hand, but inside, she's filing away the alibi's weakness. A minute or two is plenty for someone familiar with the pavilion's layout to slip through the side entrance. Deliver a poisoned dart, the police had confirmed it was curare, a rare toxin, and return unnoticed. As they chat further, Miss Marple brings up the past. Your late husband, Sir Reginald, such a tragedy, that hunting accident. He was fond of collecting exotic items, wasn't he? Poisons from South America, I heard. Lady Harrington stiffens. Gossip, Miss Marple, Reginald collected. Artifacts, yes, but nothing sinister. But Miss Marple remembers the village whispers. Sir Reginald's death had involved a blowpipe dart, ruled accidental, but his will left everything to Evelyn, cutting out his scheming brother. Could Victor Langford have known something about that? Perhaps he'd been blackmailing her over forged lace certificates that hid smuggled artifacts. Leaving the manor, Miss Marple feels a chill that's not just from the autumn air. Next on her list is Dolly Bantry, the Colonel's niece, who's staying at Gossington Hall. The hall is a rambling old place, full of hunting trophies and faded grandeur. Mrs. Bantry, Dolly's aunt and Miss Marple's old friend, answers the door herself. Jane, come in, come in. The whole village is buzzing about that dreadful murder. Dolly's upstairs, prostrate with grief for, so she says. They settle in the morning room with tea and scones, and Mrs. Bantry spills the beans without much prompting. Dolly was absolutely besotted with that Langford chap. Met him at a London auction last month. Apparently, he promised her the moon trips to Paris, rare lace for her trousseau, but Colonel Bantry didn't approve. Called him a fortune hunter. Miss Marple sips her tea. And where was Dolly during the ceremony? Mrs. Bantry leans in conspiratorially. She says she was with me, browsing the exhibits. But I lost sight of her for a bit. She popped off to the powder room, or so she claimed. Upstairs, Dolly is indeed in bed, her eyes red from crying, a romance novel discarded beside her. Oh, Miss Marple, it's too awful, she wails. Victor was going to propose. We were going to elope. Miss Marple sits beside her, offering a handkerchief. There, dear. Tell me about Victor. Did he have enemies? Perhaps in the lace trade. Dolly sniffles. He mentioned arguments with Harold Sykes, something about bad deals. And Lady Harrington. Victor said she owed him money for a shipment that went missing. Interesting, Miss Marple thinks. A motive for murder. Dolly's alibi is shaky too. The powder room is near the back of the pavilion, close to where Victor was found. And those flirtatious glances, could jealousy have played a part if Victor was two-timing her? As Miss Marple leaves Gossington Hall, she bumps into Colonel Bantry, returning from a walk, his face ruddy from the wind. Bloody nuisance, this murder. Business, he grumbles. Ruined a perfectly good festival. Miss Marple inquires casually about his whereabouts. Me, I was at the bar tent, having a nip of brandy. Ask anyone. But the bar tent is adjacent to the pavilion, with a connecting door, easy access for a quick dart. The Colonel had disapproved of Victor, after our protective uncle instincts gone too far. Miss Marple files it away and heads to the village tea shop, where gossip flows freer than the Earl Grey dot at the Blue Boar Inn's tea room. Miss Marple finds Miss Eliza Finch nursing a pot of chamomile. Eliza is a mousy woman in her 40s, her fingers calloused from years of lace-making. Shocking, isn't it? Eliza says, her voice quivering. I was right next to Victor's display when it happened. Saw him clutch his neck and fall. Miss Marple probes gently. You entered the competition. To your tatting is exquisite. Any rivalry with Mr. Langford? Eliza blushes. Oh no. But he did accuse Harold Sykes of copying designs in front of everyone. Harold was furious. Alibis. Eliza claims she was at her table the whole time. But Miss Marple recalls seeing her slip away to the refreshment area near the crime scene. Next, Miss Marple tracks down Harold Sykes at his tailor's shop, a cramped space filled with bolts of fabric and sewing machines. Harold is a wiry man with spectacles perched on his nose, threading a needle with steady hands. Miss Marple, about the murder, I suppose. He sets down his work. I didn't like Langford's shifty fellow, selling fakes as antiques, but kill him. Preposterous. His alibi, judging a side exhibit with the museum guest. But Miss Marple spots a lie. The judging ended 10 minutes before the cry rang out, and those lace needles on his table similar to the one found near the body. Harold admits to a past grudge. Victor had ruined his reputation in London years ago with false accusations of forgery, motive aplenty. By afternoon, Miss Marple returns home, her notebook filled with notes. Raymond pops in again, eager for updates. Aunt Jane, you're playing detective. Spill the beans. She shares snippets, and together they pore over the alibis. None are airtight. Lady Harrington's brief absence, Dolly's powder room trip, the Colonel's brandy break, Eliza's refreshment dash, Harold's post-judging wander. But the real breakthrough comes when Miss Marple recalls a whisper from her tea-shop visit. Lady Harrington's maiden name was Sykes Harold's cousin, a family connection hidden for years. Sir Reginald's death, Harold had been at the hunting party, and Victor, it turns out, was a distant relative who'd investigated privately, suspecting foul play to claim inheritance. As evening falls, Miss Marple knits by the window, the pieces clicking like her needles. The murder weapon, lace needle tipped with curare from Sir Reginald's collection, perhaps stolen by someone close. But who pulled the thread? She suspects it's tied to a larger web, smuggling rare poisons disguised in lace shipments, with Victor exposing it. A knock at the door. Inspector Slack, begrudgingly seeking her amateur insights. The dart was fired from a blowpipe hidden in a lace roll, he reveals. Miss Marple nods. Check Lady Harrington's tapestry for hidden compartments, Inspector Fu. What a day of twists and turns in St. Mary Mead. We've seen Miss Marple weave through alibis like a master lace maker, uncovering that shocking family link to Lady Harrington's past. But the mystery deepens. Who's the real killer pulling the strings? Hang tight for Chapter 3, where Miss Marple confronts a key suspect and discovers a secret letter that changes everything. Chapter 3, Confronting Shadows and the Secret Letter, unveiled, diving straight back into the intrigue of St. Mary Mead. Miss Marple wastes no time after her enlightening chat with Inspector Slack. The morning mist still clings to the hedgerows. As she makes her way to the police station, a modest brick building tucked behind the village green. Inspector Slack, with his perpetual scowl and starched uniform, greets her with reluctant courtesy. Miss Marple, I suppose you've got more theories. He grunts, ushering her into his cramped office, cluttered with files and a half-eaten sandwich. She settles into a chair, her eyes sharp behind her spectacles. Just a few observations, Inspector. That blowpipe hidden in a lace roll, quite ingenious. Have you examined Lady Harrington's tapestry yet? Slack admits they have. Nothing unusual. At first glance, but a closer look revealed a hidden pocket stitched into the backing. Empty now, but large enough for a small weapon. Curious, Miss Marple muses. And the curare, from Sir Reginald's collection, perhaps? Slack nods grimly. Traces match samples from the manor's attic. though Lady Harrington claims ignorance. This confirmation spurs Miss Marple to confront a key suspect, Harold Sykes, the tailor with the grudge and family ties. She heads to his shop, the bell tinkling as she enters. Harold is bent over a sewing machine, stitching a hem with mechanical precision, but his hands shake slightly when he sees her. "Back again, Miss Marple. I told you everything." She smiles, disarmingly. "Not quite, Mr. Sykes. You see, I've learned you're Lady Harrington's cousin, Evelyn Sykes, before she married. Why keep that quiet?" Harold pales, setting down his needle. Old family rift. Her father disowned mine over an inheritance squabble. We don't speak, but Miss Marple presses on. And Victor Langford. He was investigating Sir Reginald's death. Wasn't he? Thought it was murder, with you at the hunting party. Harold explodes in denial. Ridiculous. It was an accident. I was nowhere near when the dart hit him. Yet, his alibi for that long-ago day is as threadbare as an old doily. Witnesses placed him arguing with Sir Reginald hours before, as they talk. Miss Marple notices a loose floorboard under Harold's workbench, creaking underfoot. "Mind if I look?" she asks innocently. Harold protests, but she lifts it anyway, revealing a small tin box. Inside, letters, yellowed with age, and a recent one postmarked from London. "Give that back." Harold snatches, but not before Miss Marple glimpses the sender, Victor Langford. The letter demands payment for silence about the hunting truth, and the laced shipments, blackmail. Harold confesses partially. Victor had evidence linking Harold to smuggling exotic poisons in lace parcels, using his tailoring contacts. "But I didn't kill him," Harold insists. "I was going to pay." Miss Marple pockets a mental note. The letter changes everything, pointing to a web of extortion spanning years. Could Harold have snapped using a needle from his shop? Leaving the shop, Miss Marple feels the weight of discovery. She stops by the vicarage for a cup of tea with the Reverend Clement, a mild-mannered man with a penchant for village history. "Ah, Miss Marple, dreadful business," he says, pouring from a chipped pot. Over biscuits, she inquires about the Sykes-Harrington feud. The vicar recalls it vividly. A disputed will in the 1890s, leading to Evelyn's branch prospering while Harold struggled. And Sir Reginald, rumours of his South American expeditions bringing back more than souvenirs. Indeed, the vicar mentions a parish record of Reginald donating artefacts that included tribal blowpipes now missing from the church museum. Miss Marple thanks him and heads to the library. A quaint room lined with dusty tomes dot there. The librarian, Miss Weatherby, a bespectacled enthusiast, helps her dig into old newspapers. Clippings reveal Victor Langford wasn't just a lace importer. He was a private investigator in disguise, specializing in estate disputes. One article links him to exposing a forgery ring in London, where lace certificates hid smuggled gems and poisons. "Fascinating," Miss Marple murmurs. Connecting dots. Victor blackmailing Harold over the smuggling, and perhaps Lady Harrington over her husband's accident. But who benefited most from his death? As she leaves, a young assistant whispers about seeing Dolly Bantry arguing with Victor the night before the festival. In the Blue Borin's garden-heated words about broken promises. Back home, Miss Marple spreads the letters, implications in her mind like a lace pattern. Raymond arrives, bearing scones from the bakery. "Aunt Jane, you look triumphant. Found the killer." She shares the secret letter's contents carefully, avoiding police confidences. Raymond's writerly imagination flares. Blackmail. It's like my novel, The Poisoned Pin. Together, they brainstorm. The blowpipe could have been fired from afar, hidden in the pavilion's rafters, but the dart's angle suggests close range. Miss Marple recalls Eliza Finch's nervous fidgeting near Victor. Perhaps she knew of the smuggling too, her tatting business a cover. A knock interrupts Darley Bantry, tear-streaked and desperate. "Miss Marple, I need help." Victor was going to expose something about Uncle Arthur the Colonel, a war scandal involving stolen artifacts. Dolly spills Colonel Bantry during his army days in India had acquired rare laces laced with opium residues, now valuable. Victor discovered it and demanded hush money. I argued with him to stop, but he laughed. Her confrontation places her near the scene again. Miss Marple comforts her, but notes the girl's lace brooch a needle pin that could deliver poison. As Dolly leaves, Inspector Slack telephones. Forensics on the needle found at the scene match Harold's shop, but fingerprints are smudged multiple sets. The plot thickens like overstarched lace. Evening descends, and Miss Marple sits by her, fire knitting furiously. The secret letter unveils a tapestry of motives. Harold's grudge, Lady Harrington's inheritance protection, Dolly's love turned sour, the Colonel's hidden shame. But a new thread emerges: Miss Finch's late entry to the competition, a lace collar, with odd stitching that might conceal messages. Miss Marple decides to investigate Eliza next, sensing the unassuming spinster holds a key. As stars twinkle outside, she murmurs, "People are like lace, beautiful on the surface, but full of hidden holes." There you have it, folks, a chapter packed with confrontations, revelations, and that game-changing secret letter shaking up the suspects. Miss Marple's net is tightening, but dangers lurk in the shadows. Stay tuned for Chapter 4, where a midnight prowler invades the pavilion, and Miss Marple uncovers a forged will that ties the murders together. Chapter 4, The Midnight Prowler and the Forged Legacy, picking up the delicate threads from our last unraveling. Miss Marple can't shake the unease settling over St. Mary Mead like a fog. That night, after Dolly's confession, sleep eludes her. She paces her cottage, the clock ticking past midnight, when a distant sound of muffled crash drifts from the direction of the Lace Pavilion. "Not foxes this time," she whispers, donning her dressing gown and slippers. Grabbing her torch and walking stick, she slips out into the moonlit garden, the air crisp with frost. The village sleeps, but Miss Marple's instincts scream of foul play. She creeps along the hedgerows, avoiding the main path, her heart pounding not from fear but anticipation. Nearing the pavilion, its glass dome gleams eerily. She spots a shadowy figure inside, fumbling among the displays. Hiding behind a bush, Miss Marple watches as the prowler cloaked and hooded trifles through Victor's exhibit table, scattering lace pieces. A glint of metal, a tool, or another weapon. She edges closer, peering through a side window. The figure pauses, head turning as if sensing eyes, then darts to Lady Harrington's tapestry, tearing at the seams, looking for something hidden. Miss Marple thinks. Boldly, she raps her stick on the glass. "Who's there?" The prowler startles, dropping a sheaf of papers, and flees through the back door into the woods. Miss Marple enters, cautiously. The door was jimmy-danned, examines the dropped items, documents, including a will. Sir Reginald's last testament, but this version differs from the official one. Forged. It cuts out Lady Harrington entirely, leaving everything to his brother, and naming Harold Sykes as executor. "A motive for murder twice over," she murmurs. She pockets the forged will carefully, using her handkerchief to avoid prints, and telephones Inspector Slack from the pavilion's office. "Another break-in, Inspector. An evidence you must see." Slack arrives, grumbling, his pajamas peeking under his coat, with 2 constables. They secure the scene, noting footprints, men's boots, size 10 and a discarded glove smelling of tailor's chalk. "Harold again," Slack mutters. Miss Marple hands over the will. "Compare it to the original. This forgery would ruin Lady Harrington if exposed. Forensics later confirm the ink is modern, the signature traced. But who forged it? Victor, perhaps, as part of his blackmail scheme." The next day, news of the prowler spreads like wildfire through the village. Miss Marple visits Eliza Finch first, the spinster's cottage, a haven of lace doilies and spinning. "Wheels." Eliza answers the door nervously, her hands twisting a hank of thread. Miss Marple about the murder. They sit in the parlor, sunlight filtering through lace curtains, casting intricate shadows. Miss Marple mentions the break-in casually. "Someone after hidden documents, it seems." Eliza pales. I saw someone lurking near the pavilion last night from my window." Her alibi for the midnight hour. Insomnia, reading by lamplight. "But..." Miss Marple spots a muddy boot by the doorwomen's. "But the prowler was larger." "You knew Victor well, didn't you?" Miss Marple probes. Eliza admits they were distant cousins. "Victor roped her into authenticating fake laces for his smuggling. He threatened to expose my forgeries if I didn't help." Motive for Eliza. Perhaps, especially if Victor demanded more. From there, Miss Marple heads to Gossington Hall, where Colonel Bantry is polishing his hunting rifle in the study. "Damned prowler," he bellows. "If I'd caught him... His alibi sound asleep, but Mrs. Bantry mentions he often walks at night for indigestion. The Colonel bristles at questions about his Indian artifacts. Old souvenirs, nothing more. But Miss Marple recalls Dolly's whisperer-laced opium scandal. Inspecting a display case, she finds a blowpipe similar to the murder weapon. Borrowed from the church museum. The Colonel flushes. Returned it ages ago. Lie. The vicar confirmed it's missing. Lunch with Raymond provides a breather. Aunt Jane, this forged Willet's dynamite. Lady Harrington forged it to secure her fortune, then killed Reginald. Miss Marple shakes her head. No, dear. The forgery postdates his death. Likely Victor's work, to pressure her. They discuss the prowler. Footprints match Harold's boots, but the glove has initials AB, Arthur Bantry, or a plant. Afternoon. Brings a visit to Lady Harrington, who denies knowledge of the forgery. Preposterous. My husband's will was ironclad, but her eyes betray fear. She admits Victor approached her weeks ago, claiming proof she orchestrated Reginald's accident with Harold's help family reconciliation through murder. I refused to pay, she says. Her alibi for midnight, alone in her room, but Jenkins. The butler hesitates when confirming. As dusk falls, Miss Marple pieces it together in her garden, pruning roses. The forged will ties the old murder to the new. Victor, discovering the truth, forged it to blackmail multiple parties. Harold for complicity. Lady for inheritance. Colonel for artifacts smuggled via the same network. Eliza for forgeries. Dolly as unwitting pawn. The prowler sought to retrieve or destroy it. A sudden realization. The gloves chalk, sent tailors, but Colonel Bantry uses chalk for billiards. Dual clues. Inspector Slack calls. The prowler's footprints lead to the manor woods, and a witness saw a figure resembling Dolly. Sneaky, confronting Dolly privately, Miss Marple learns the truth. Dolly was the prowler, sent by the Colonel to fetch the will Victor had hidden in the tapestry. Uncle said it would ruin us, she sobs. But she didn't kill Victor. She loved him, despite his schemes. The Colonel interrupts, confessing partially. I argued with Langford, but no more. Miss Marple senses layers, unsaid the forgery bears traces of Eliza's tatting ink. Evening tea. With Mrs. Bantry reveals more gossip. Eliza and Harold, secret lovers, plotting together. As night deepens, Miss Marple knits, the forged legacy illuminating paths to the killer. Motives entwined like bobbin lace. Greed, revenge, protection. But a missing link nags the curry sauce, perhaps from the Colonel's Indian stash. She resolves to search the hall tomorrow, wrapping this chapter of midnight mysteries and forged deceptions. Miss Marple edges closer to the heart of the web. The pavilion's shadows hide more than lace. They conceal deadly secrets. Join us in Chapter 5, where a surprise confession rocks the village, and Miss Marple sets a trap for the true culprit. Chapter 5. The surprise, confession, and setting the trap with the forged will now in police hands, and the midnight prowler's identity partially unmasked as Dolly acting on orders. Miss Marple senses the noose tightening round the true culprit. The morning after the break in Revelations, she awakens to a knock at her cottage door. It's Mrs. Bantry. Her face flushed with urgency, clutching a basket of fresh eggs as a pretext. Jane, you must come to Gossington Hall at once, she whispers, glancing over her shoulder. The Colonel's in a state he's talking of confessing to Inspector Slack. Miss Marple raises an eyebrow, intrigued. She quickly dresses in her usual sensible attire, pins her brooch, and accompanies her friend back to the hall, where the air hangs heavy with tension. The Colonel is in his study, pacing before the fireplace, his moustache twitching, a tumbler of whiskey in hand despite the early hour. Dolly huddles in a corner armchair, pale and silent, while Inspector Slack stands by the window, notebook poised. All right, Bantry, Slack barks, out with it. You sent the girl to retrieve that will. Why? The Colonel stops pacing, squares his shoulders like a soldier facing a firing squad, and blurts out, because Langford was a blackmailing swine, that's why. He knew about my Indian days. Those souvenirs weren't just lace. Some had residues of rare substances, valuable now but illegal then. He threatened to expose me, ruin the family name. I confronted him at the festival, yes, but I swear I didn't kill him. The room falls silent. Miss Marple, seated quietly on a velvet settee, observes the Colonel's clenched fists and Dolly's averted eyes. And the blowpipe in your case? She asks softly. The Colonel deflates. It's mine, from India, but I haven't used it in years. Someone must have taken it. Slack presses for details. The confrontation happened minutes before the cry, near the back exhibits, but witnesses confirm the Colonel was at the bar afterward, brandy in hand. His confession rocks the village as word leaks out. Gossip at the post office buzzes with tales of colonial scandals, painting the Colonel as a desperate man. Miss Marple isn't convinced this is the full story. Confessions often mask deeper truths, like a lace veil over a flaw. She excuses herself and visits the church museum, a dusty annex to the vicarage filled with relics. The vicar, polishing a brass candlestick, confirms the blowpipe's disappearance. Weeks ago, odd, that he says. Only a few have keys. Myself, Lady Harrington for donations, and Eliza Finch, who volunteers here. Eliza, again her tatting ink on the forgery, suggests involvement beyond blackmail. Miss Marple thanks him and strolls to Eliza's cottage, finding the door ajar. Inside, Eliza is packing a suitcase frantically, lace scraps scattered like snow. Going somewhere, Miss Finch? Miss Marple inquires mildly. Eliza jumps, dropping a bobbin. Just visiting relatives. But under gentle probing, Eliza crumbles slightly. Victor was my cousin, yes, but he forced me into his schemes. That forgery, he made me trace the signature using my inks. I wanted out, but he threatened to tell Harold. No full confession, but her nervousness hints at more. Perhaps she saw the killer, or aided, unwittingly. By afternoon, the village is abuzz. The Colonel's partial admission has suspects eyeing each other warily. Miss Marple returns home to find Raymond waiting with a pot of tea. Aunt Jane, the Colonel's confession, it's explosive. But you think it's a red herring? She nods, sharing her plan. Set a trap to flush out the real murderer. We'll announce a reenactment of the festival opening at the pavilion tomorrow evening, inviting all suspects under the guise of aiding the police reconstruction. Raymond's eyes light up, brilliant, like a scene from my mysteries. They coordinate with Slack, who grumbles but agrees, stationing constables hidden in the rafters. Invitations go out. Lady Harrington for her speech, Harold to display his entries, Eliza for judging, Dolly and the Bantrys as witnesses. Miss Marple adds a twist in whispers that new evidence, a hidden witness statement, will be revealed as evening approaches. Miss Marple prepares meticulously, tucking a small magnifying glass into her handbag. She arrives early at the pavilion, now cordoned but lit softly with lanterns, lace displays rearranged to mimic the fatal day. Suspects trickle in. Lady Harrington elegant but tense, Harold fidgeting with his needles, Eliza clutching her tatting shuttle, the Bantrys subdued, Dolly tearful. Slack directs the reenactment. Lady Harrington, take the stage. Mr. Sykes, stand by your table, Miss Bantry, near the back. As they position, Miss Marple wanders, dropping subtle bait. To Harold, that letter from Victor, did it mention the curry sauce? He flushes. To Eliza, your inks on the will accidental or part of a larger forgery ring? She stammers. To the Colonel, your blowpipe found in the woods, perhaps discarded after use? He growls denial. The reenactment begins. Lady Harrington ascends the platform, reciting her speech haltingly. The air thickens with anticipation. Miss Marple positions near Victor's former spot, her eyes scanning for Telza, twitch a glance. Suddenly, a rustle from the side entrance, someone slipping in late. No, it's Jenkins, Lady Harrington's butler, arriving uninvited with a tray of refreshments. Odd, Miss Marple thinks. He wasn't at the original event. As Lady Harrington reaches the unveiling part, a dart whistles through the air, embedding in a dummy placed where Victor stood. Chaos erupts, but constables pounce from the shadows. Emerges not a suspect, but Jenkins, blowpipe in hand, his face twisted in shock at being caught. Jenkins. Lady Harrington gasps. The butler struggles, but deflates under Slack's grip. Miss Marple steps forward calmly. You see, Inspector, Jenkins has been the silent thread all along, loyal to Sir Reginald's brother, cut from the will. He forged the new version with Victor's help, using Eliza's inks and Harold's knowledge. But when Victor demanded more blackmail, Jenkins poisoned him with curry from the Colonel's stash, stolen via the museum key he borrowed from Lady Harrington's donations. Jenkins confesses haltingly, years of resentment, smuggling poisons in lace for profit, Victor's greed pushing him to murder. The trap worked. The new evidence bait lured him to strike again, fearing exposure. As handcuffs click, the pavilion clears, suspects exhaling in relief or shame. Miss Marple smiles faintly. Justice, like fine lace, requires patience to weave. But loose ends Jenkins mentioned an accomplice in the smuggling ring. Someone higher up. That wraps our chapter of shocking confessions and clever traps, leaving St. Mary Mead reeling from Jenkins' unexpected role. Yet the web isn't fully unraveled. Hints of a larger conspiracy linger. Hold on for Chapter 6. Where Miss Marple delves into the smuggling underworld and faces a dangerous confrontation in the manor attic. Chapter 6. Delving into the smuggling ring and the attic confrontation, fresh from Jenkins' arrest, which ties up the murder but opens a Pandora's box of illicit dealings. Miss Marple turns her attention to the smuggling operation hinted at in his interrogation. The morning sun filters through her cottage windows as she reviews notes over breakfast porridge, listing connections, poisons hidden in lace shipments, Victor's imports as cover, Harold's tailoring for alterations, Eliza's authentications, even the Colonel's old artifacts as sources. A ring indeed, she murmurs, with tentacles reaching beyond the village. Inspector Slack, unusually deferential after the trap's success, shares Jenkins' partial confession. The butler coordinated drops at the manor, but a mastermind orchestrated. From afar, using coded messages in lace patterns. Miss Marple decides to infiltrate this underworld subtly, starting with a visit to Victor's London contacts, but first, local leads. She heads to Harold's shop, now shuttered but unlocked. Harold is inside, sorting threads despondently. Miss Marple, after Jenkins. Is it over? She shakes her head. Not quite. Those bad deals with Victor's smuggling details. Harold sighs, admitting he modified lace pieces to conceal vials, paid handsomely but blackmailed later. The codes were in the stitching bobbin patterns, signaling drop points. He shows her a sample, a doily with irregular knots forming Morse-like signals for manor attic. Eureka, the attic site of Sir Reginald's collections, now Lady Harrington's domain. Miss Marple thanks him and proceeds to the manor, where Lady Harrington, recovering from the shock, receives her in the library. Jenkins' betrayal unthinkable, she laments, but Miss Marple detects evasion. Your donations to the museum included smuggling aids. Lady Harrington denies, but her trembling teacup betrays knowledge. Pressing on, Miss Marple requests attic access for police inventory. Reluctantly, Lady Harrington provides the key, warning of dust and disarray. Alone in the dim, cobweb-draped space, Miss Marple climbs creaky stairs, torch in hand. Trunks overflow with exotic items, tribal masks, feathered headdresses, and yes, lace-wrapped bundles. She unwraps one empty, but residue suggests Rari. Deeper in, a locked chest yields to her hairpin pick. Inside, ledgers detailing shipments, names coded but decipherable. EF for Eliza Finch, HS for Harold, VL crossed out. Post. A shadow falls. Miss Marple spins to face Eliza, wild-eyed, holding a lace needle tipped suspiciously. You shouldn't pry, Miss Marple. The confrontation escalates. Eliza lunges, but Miss Marple dodges, using her walking stick to disarm. Why, Eliza, the mastermind? Eliza collapses, sobbing. No, just a pawn. Victor started it, but after his death, someone else took over, demanding continuation. Pinned, Eliza reveals. The ring smuggled rare toxins for pharmaceutical black markets, laced in antique fabrics to evade customs. She joined for money, forging certificates, but feared exposure. The new leader, a coded initial AB, not the colonel, but Arthur Bantry. No Wait Jenkins mentioned the brother, Sir Reginald's sibling, cut from the will, living incognito nearby. Miss Marple binds Eliza loosely with lace cord and calls slack from below. But as constables arrive, a crash echoes. Someone fleeing the attic window via fire escape. Pursuit ensues through the gardens, but the figure vanishes into the woods. Back at the cottage, Raymond helps analyze the ledgers. Aunt Jane, this B could be Alfred Belling, Sir Reginald's brother, rumoured dead but perhaps alive. A quick village inquiry confirms. Belling, disowned, vanished years ago, but recent sightings of a reclusive man at a nearby farm. Miss Marple visits the farm that afternoon, a rundown place with overgrown fields. The door opens to a grizzled man matching old photos of Alfred. "What do you want, old woman?" he snarls. Feigning a lost walker, Miss Marple engages him in talk of lace festivals. He slips. That pavilion, perfect for drops. Confronted Alfred. Admits masterminding the ring after Reginald's death, using Jenkins as frontman, forging the will to reclaim inheritance. Victor's greed threatened exposure, so Alfred ordered the hit, providing the dart. But Jenkins botched the cleanup. He growls, lunging with a hidden knife. Miss Marple, prepared, trips him with her stick. Raymond, trailing secretly, bursts in with a constable. Alfred is subdued, confessing fully. He killed Reginald too, staging the accident for revenge, then built the smuggling empire. The ring dismantled, accomplices rounded up Eliza for aiding, Harold for modifications, though lenient sentences loom for cooperation. As twilight falls, Miss Marple reflects in her garden, the case closed like a finished lace piece. St. Mary Mead returns to peace, but she knows human nature's knots persist. Few would a dive into shadowy dealings and attic thrills. With the smuggling ring busted and the mastermind caged, our tale nears its end. Tune in for Chapter 7, where loose ends tie up in a village gathering, and Miss Marple shares wisdom on hidden motives. Chapter 7. Tying loose ends at the village gathering with the smuggling ring dismantled and Alfred Belling, the shadowy mastermind, behind bars alongside Jenkins and Eliza. St. Mary Mead breathes a cautious sigh of relief. But Miss Marple, ever the meticulous weaver, knows that even the finest lacework needs its edges secured. It's a bright Saturday morning. The village green, alive with preparations for an impromptu gathering, a tea party to restore community spirit after the scandal. The vicar has organized it, with trestle tables under the oaks laden with scones, jam and steaming urns. Miss Marple, in her best lavender cardigan, arrives early, her notebook tucked discreetly in her handbag. She's not here just for tea. She's determined to tie up the case's loose ends and share insights on the human motives that unraveled so spectacularly. As villagers gather, the mood is a mix of relief and lingering unease. Mrs. Bantry, bustling about with a tray of cucumber sandwiches, spots Miss Marple and hurries over. "Jane, you're a marvel. The whole village is talking about how you caught that dreadful Alfred." Miss Marple demurs, adjusting her spectacles. "Just observation, Dolly. People reveal themselves in the smallest threads." She scans the crowd. Lady Harrington, subdued but present, chatting with the mayor. Harold Sykes, out on bail, hovering awkwardly near the cake stand. Dolly Bantry, clinging to her uncle's arm, still shaken. And Colonel Bantry, gruff but relieved his name is cleared. The absence of Eliza, now cooperating with police, is keenly felt. Her lace stall replaced by a flower display, Miss Marple begins her quiet investigation, mingling with purpose. First, she approaches Lady Harrington, who's sipping tea under a parasol. Lady Harrington, the manor must feel lighter without Jenkins' shadow, Miss Marple says gently. The widow nods, her eyes weary. I trusted him, Miss Marple. How could I not see his resentment? Probing further, Miss Marple confirms a lingering question. Jenkins had access to the manor's attic keys, but Lady Harrington never suspected the smuggling. Reginald's collections were his pride, she admits. I thought them harmless relics. Miss Marple notes her sincerity, but recalls a detail from the ledger shipments marked EH. Could Evelyn have unknowingly facilitated a drop? She files it away, suggesting perhaps a full inventory of the attic to prevent future surprises. Lady Harrington agrees, promising to cooperate with the police. Next, Miss Marple joins Harold at the cake stand, where he's nibbling a scone nervously. Mr. Sykes, your cooperation helped immensely, she says, softening his defenses. But tell me, those coded doilies, did you create them alone? Harold hesitates, then admits, Victor designed the patterns, I just stitched them. He was clever, too clever. He reveals a final loose end. Victor had a London contact, a dealer named Clara Wren, who supplied the curari and may still be at large. Miss Marple nods, recalling Clara's name in the Legerza thread for Slack to pursue. Harold, grateful for leniency, vows to stick to honest tailoring. No more secrets, he murmurs, and Miss Marple believes him. His fear of Alfred's wrath was motive enough to comply, not kill. The tea party hums along, children playing tag, villagers swapping stories. Miss Marple sits with Dolly and the Colonel, who's grumbling about the press, sniffing around. Dolly, dear, Miss Marple says, you're looking stronger. Dolly blushes, admitting she's written to a London friend for a fresh start. Victor dazzled me, but I see now he used me. The Colonel pats her hand, his own secrets laid bare, but forgiven. Miss Marple inquires about his Indian artifacts were any more laced with contraband. He swears not, and a police search of Gossington Hall found nothing further. Clean slate, Miss Marple, he says gruffly. She smiles, satisfied, but notes his billiard chalk habit. No longer a clue, but a reminder of how details mislead. As the vicar calls for a toast to community resilience, Miss Marple takes the opportunity to address the crowd at Mrs. Bantry's urging. Standing on a small platform, she speaks softly but with authority. Friends, lace is delicate, yet strong, much like our village. We've seen greed and betrayal, but also truth and courage. People's motives, love, fear, revenge are like threads in a pattern. Observe closely, and they reveal themselves. The crowd nods, some teary, others thoughtful. She steps down, declining applause, but whispers to Slack about Clara Wren. A London lead inspector, don't let it slip. Slack, now a grudging admirer, promises a follow-up. The gathering winds down, villagers dispersing with lighter hearts. Raymond joins Miss Marple, carrying her shawl. Aunt Jane, you've spun a masterpiece. But that Clara Wrennan, other villain. Miss Marple chuckles. Perhaps dear, or just another pawn. Crime is a web, not a single thread. Back home, she reflects by her fire, knitting a new doily. The case feels resolved, but Clara's name nags her. Shadow beyond St. Mary Mead. She pens a note to Slack, urging vigilance, and tucks her notebook away, satisfied for now. And there we are, folks, a chapter of mending hearts and tying up threads. At a village tea party, with Miss Marple's wisdom shining through, but a new name, Clara Wren, hints at dangers beyond the green. Stay with us for Chapter 8, where Miss Marple follows a lead to London and uncovers a hidden stash that threatens to reignite the scandal. Chapter 8, A London Lead and the Hidden Stashter. Mention of Clara Wren. Victor's London contact lights a spark in Miss Marple's mind, like a dropped stitch that could unravel a whole garment. She's not one for city bustle, but by Monday morning she's on a train to London, her knitting bag doubling as a discreet case file. Raymond insists on joining, thrilled by the prospect of urban adventure. Aunt Jane, it's like one of my novels, chasing a shadowy dealer through London's underbelly. Miss Marple humours him, but her focus is razor sharp. Clara Wren, listed in the ledgers as a supplier of curare, could be the final knot in the smuggling ring or a new threat entirely. The train rattles through green fields into sooty stations, and soon they're navigating the crowded streets of Bloomsbury, where Victor's business address lies. Their destination is a narrow shopfront labelled Wren's Antiques and Textiles, wedged between a bookbinder and a tobacconist. The window displays laced veils and embroidered shawls, but the air feels heavy with secrets. Inside, Clara Wren greets them, a wiry woman in her 40s, with sharp eyes and a smile that doesn't reach them. Miss Marple, from St. Mary Mead. What brings you to my humble shop? Her voice is smooth, but her fingers twist a lace handkerchief nervously. Miss Marple, ever polite, mentions browsing for rare patterns, but slips in a question. You knew Victor Langford, didn't you? Such a tragedy at our festival. Clara's face tightens. A client, yes. Terrible news. But her gaze darts to a back room, curtained off. Raymond, playing the eager nephew, distracts Clara with chatter about Venetian lace, giving Miss Marple a chance to observe. She notices a ledger on the counter, its pages marked with the same coded knots as Herald's doilies. May I see your stockroom? She asks innocently. Clara hesitates, then leads them through the curtain. The room is a treasure trove, crates of lace, some labelled Brussels or Chantilly, but others unmarked, stacked suspiciously high. Miss Marple's torch catches a glinter-glass vial hidden in a lace roll, its contents dark and oily. Curare, she's certain. Careless to leave such things about, she remarks. Clara laughs it off. Oh, just dye samples. But her voice cracks. Seizing the moment, Miss Marple presses. Victor sent shipments here, coded for drops. You supplied the poisons, didn't you? Clara denies it, but Raymond, quick on the uptake, blocks the door. We're not leaving until you explain, he says firmly. Cornered, Clara admits partial involvement. She sourced rare toxins for Victor, believing they were for collectors, not murder. Alfred Belling ran the show, she insists. After Victor's death, he ordered me to keep quiet, or else. But Miss Marple spots a like Clara's ledger shows recent transactions, post Alfred's arrest. Who's running it now? She demands. Clara clams up, but a noisy creak from above betrays. Someone upstairs. Miss Marple, undaunted, climbs the narrow stairs to a cluttered office. There, rifling through files, is a man in a tailored suit, Mr. Percival Fortescue, a name from the ledgers, a silent partner in Victor's schemes. Miss Marple, he exclaims, startled, dropping a bundle of lace-wrapped vials. Just checking. Inventory, but the game's up. MissMarple.com, as ever, says, smuggling poisons in lace, Mr. Fortescue. The police will be interested. Raymond phones Scotland Yard from a nearby call box, and soon detectives swarm the shop. Clara, now panicked, confesses fully. Fortescue took over after Alfred, using her shop as a front, hiding toxins in lace exports to Europe. The stash upstairs, dozens of vials, confirms it, enough to supply black markets for years. For a slick businessman with ties to pharmaceutical tries to bargain, but Miss Marple's evidence is ironclad. Ledgers, vials, and a coded telegram linking him to overseas buyers. As he's led away, Clara, tearful, promises to testify for leniency. "I didn't know it would lead to murder," she sobs. Miss Marple, sympathetic but firm, advises honesty now, dear. We'll mend some threads. The detectives thank her, one muttering, "How does a village spinster outsmart us all?" Raymond grins. It's Aunt Jane, she sees the pattern. Back on the train to St. Mary Mead, Miss Marple reflects on the day's whirlwind. The hidden stash seals the smuggling ring's fate, but she wonders about smaller players' village. Couriers, perhaps, unaware of their cargo. At home, Inspector Slack visits, impressed. "London singing your praises, Miss Marple. The ring's done for." She offers tea, sharing a final insight. Crime hides in beauty, inspector-like. Poison in lace. But truth always shows through. Raymond, scribbling notes for a novel, begs for details, but she smiles enigmatically. "Enough excitement, dear. Time for knitting." What a thrilling chase through London shadows, uncovering Clara Wren's stash and nabbing the ring's new leader. The case seems closed, but Miss Marple's instincts linger on St. Mary Mead's quiet corners. Join us for Chapter 9, where a final twist emerges at the manor, and Miss Marple delivers justice with a surprising ally. Chapter 9. The final twist at the manor, with the smuggling rings, London arm severed, and Percival Fortescue in custody. Miss Marple returns to St. Mary Mead, her mind still threading through the case's final intricacies. The autumn chill deepens, leaves swirling across her garden path as she sips tea by her cottage window, contemplating a nagging detail, those initials in the smuggling ledgers. Could Lady Harrington, despite her denials, have been more than an unwitting pawn? The manor, with its attic of secrets, beckons for one last investigation. Miss Marple decides to visit under the guise of returning a borrowed lace pattern, but her true aim is to uncover any hidden complicity. She telephones Raymond, who's itching to join. Aunt Jane, another twist. This case is better than my manuscripts. They set off for the manor at dusk, the sky streaked with crimson, a fitting backdrop for what's to come. At the manor, Lady Harrington welcomes them into the drawing room, her composure strained but intact. The fire crackles, casting shadows on the ornate wallpaper, and a tray of sherry sits untouched. "Miss Marple, Raymond, what a surprise," she says, her voice tight, "just tidying up after everything." Miss Marple, ever tactful, presents the lace pattern, then steers the conversation. The attic inventory, any surprises? Lady Harrington shakes her head, but her fingers clutch her pearl necklace too tightly. Raymond, picking up his aunt's cue, mentions the ledgers casually. "Those markings odd, don't you think? Almost like someone close to the manor was involved." Lady Harrington's eyes flicker with panic, and she excuses herself to fetch a shawl, leaving them alone. Seizing the moment, Miss Marple whispers to Raymond, "Keep watch, dear." She slips upstairs to the attic, torch in hand, navigating the now familiar maze of trunks and relics. A locked cabinet, overlooked before, catches her eye, its keyhole scratched, recently forced. Using her trusty hairpin, She opens it to find a hidden compartment, a small diary, leather-bound, with E.H. embossed. Inside, meticulous entries in Lady Harrington's hand detail lace shipments, not antiques, but modern pieces laced with toxins, marked for European buyers. Dates align with Victor's deals, but one entry, post-murder, references a final delivery overseen by E.H. herself. Miss Marple's heart sinks. Lady Harrington wasn't just complicit. She was orchestrating after Alfred's arrest, stepping into the void to protect her wealth. Footsteps interrupt Lady Harrington. Shawl forgotten, stands at the attic door, a small pistol gleaming in her hand. "You're too clever, Miss Marple," she says, her voice icy. "I didn't want it to come to this." Raymond, who'd crept up behind, tackles her gently, disarming her with surprising agility. "Sorry, Lady H, but you're caught." The pistol clatters to the floor, and Lady Harrington collapses onto a trunk, sobbing. "It was for the manor, the legacy," she confesses. "Reginald's debts left me nothing. Victor offered a way out smuggling in lace. After his death, I couldn't stop. The buyers demanded more. She'd used Jenkins as a scapegoat, unaware he'd kill for Alfred, and continued the operation alone, forging ledger entries to deflect suspicion. MissMarple.com. Despite the drama, binds Lady Harrington's wrists with a lace cord. Poetic Justice and calls Inspector Slack from the manor's phone. He arrives with constables, stunned by the twist. Lady Harrington, the mastermind. The diary seals her fate, detailing every transaction, including a planned shipment hidden in the pavilion's prize veil, set to leave tomorrow. Slack orders a search, recovering the veil stuffed with curare vials, ready for a courier. Lady Harrington, defeated, admits her role in Reginald's death to a planned accident to secure the estate with Jenkins' help. "I thought I'd outsmarted everyone," she murmurs as she's led away. Back at the cottage, Raymond pours tea, reeling. "Aunt Jane, you turned the grande dame into a villain. How'd you know?" Miss Marple smiles faintly. "Human nature, dear. Greed weaves the tightest webs." She reflects on the manor's fouler symbol of elegance, undone by desperation. Slack visits, grumbling gratitude. "You've saved us again, Miss Marple. The smuggling's done." But she warns, check the European buyers, Inspector. The web may stretch further. As Raymond scribbles notes for his novel, Miss Marple knits, the case's threads nearly tied, save for one final act of justice. What a twist, folks. Lady Harrington, unmasked as the smuggling queen, her manor a facade for crime. The net closes, but Miss Marple's work isn't done. Join us for the final chapter, where she delivers justice with a surprising ally and restores peace to St. Mary Mead. Chapter 10. Justice delivered with a surprising Aletha arrest of Lady Harrington sends ripples through St. Mary Mead. Like a stone dropped in a quiet pond. The village, still reeling from the smuggling ring's exposure, craves closure, and Miss Marple, ever the steady hand, is determined to deliver it. It's a crisp Sunday morning, the church bells chiming as villagers gather for service, but Miss Marple has one final task. She's learned from Inspector Slack that the prize veil, stuffed with curare, was meant for a courier arriving today, a last loose thread in the smuggling saga. But more intriguingly, a surprising ally emerges to help tie it off, Mrs. Bantry. Her old friend, whose gossip network rivals Miss Marple's own deductive skills. Jane, Mrs. Bantry, had whispered last night. "I've heard whispers at the Women's Institute. Someone's been seen at the old mill, waiting for a package." Miss Marple, intrigued, enlists her friend for a final sting. They meet at the cottage, Mrs. Bantry brimming with nervous excitement. "It's like being in one of Arthur's war stories," she exclaims, clutching a thermos of tea for their mission. Miss Marple outlines the plan: intercept the courier at the mill, an abandoned structure by the river, long rumoured as a smuggler's hideout. She's alerted Slack, who'll station plainclothes officers nearby, but Miss Marple and Mrs. Bantry will pose as curious locals to avoid spooking the target. "We're just two old dears out for a walk," Miss Marple says with a twinkle. They set off, arm in arm, their sensible shoes crunching on the frosty path. The mill's crumbling silhouette looming ahead. At the mill, overgrown with ivy and creaking in the wind. They spot a young woman, nervous, checking a pocket watch. It's Miss Clara Wren's assistant, Lily Porter, identified from a London police photo faxed to Slack. Miss Marple approaches, feigning surprise. "Oh, my dear, are you lost? This old mill's quite a ruin." Lily startles, dropping a lace-wrapped parcel, small but heavy with vials. Miss Marple guesses. Mrs. Bantry, quick on her feet, picks it up, cooing, "What lovely lace. A festival left over." Lily stammers, "Just delivering for Miss Wren." But her eyes dart to the riverbank, where a man in a dark coat wets a European buyer. Per the ledger's codes, Miss Marple signals Slack with a subtle handkerchief. Wave, and constables emerge, nabbing Lily and the buyer, a Dutch dealer named Vandermeer. The parcel confirms their suspicions. Curare vials, ready for export. Lily, trembling, confesses she was coerced by Fortescue's threats, unaware of the full scope until too late. Vandermeer, silent, is linked to a Rotterdam syndicate closing the smuggling loop. Mrs. Bantry, thrilled, whispers, "Jane, we're heroines." Miss Marple chuckles, "Just observant, Dolly. You were splendid." Slack, arriving to oversee arrests, tips his hat. "Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple, you've outdone Scotland Yard." Back at the village, news of the mill bust spreads, restoring faith in justice. Miss Marple hosts a small tea at her cottage, inviting the Bantrys, Raymond, and the vicar. Over scones, they reflect on the case's lessons. Greed and secrets wove this web, Miss Marple muses, but kindness and truth unravelled it. Dolly, now planning to study art in London, thanks her for clarity. "You saved me from Victor's lies." The Colonel, humbled, vows to donate his Indian artifacts to a museum properly catalogued. Raymond, penning his novel's climax, begs for Miss Marple's secret. "Patience, dear," she says, "and watching the little things like knots in lace." As evening falls, the vicar shares a parish announcement. The Lace Pavilion will reopen next spring, cleansed of its dark history, with Miss Marple's shawl as the centerpiece. She blushes, deflecting praise. Later, alone by her fire, she knits, reflecting on St. Mary Mead's resilience. The smuggling ring, from Jenkins to Lady Harrington to Fortescue, is gone, and the village can heal. A letter from Slack arrives. The European syndicate is under investigation, thanks to her leads. "You're a marvel, Miss Marple," he writes. "A rare compliment. And that's the end of our tale, folks. A whirlwind of murder, smuggling, and clever traps, all unravelled by Miss Marple's keen eye and Mrs. Bantry's surprising pluck. St. Mary Mead is quiet again. It's lace pure once more. If you've loved this journey, hit that like button, subscribe for more mysteries, and comment below who's your favourite sleuth. Until next time, keep an eye on the little threads. They tell the biggest stories.